In this video, we're pulling back the curtain to show you 4 no-code apps we've built on Bubble that help run our entire no-code business. A lot of the apps built on Bubble are for internal use for people's existing businesses. We've done this ourselves, many of our clients have. On the flip side though, of course, there are tons of apps built on Bubble that are for external use. So they are built to be new startups or new businesses. The thing is, if you're building a new business or a startup on Bubble, chances are at some point you're also going to start building internal tools to help your own new app-based business grow and evolve. So today we're going to walk through 4 of the apps we've personally built so you can see what's possible for your own business, maybe now or in the future. Now stick around until the end because the last example we're going to go through is applicable no matter what type of app you're building. It's Kristen over at Coaching No Code Apps. We help non-technical entrepreneurs build custom apps so they can start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses all without coding. And if that's what you're doing, then subscribe to this channel for new videos to help you every single week. All right, so there are 4 tools we're going to go over today, and each of them apply to different areas of the business. Now, the cool thing is for some of these tools, they are replacing other tools that we otherwise would have been paying for. In some cases, these just allow us to have custom features within our business and custom dashboards and things like that that we just would not be able to get anywhere else. So we're going to go through the tools and what they do so you can see the capabilities, but we're also going to talk about how they help our business so you can start to apply these scenarios to your own app and business. One of the free resources we offer to entrepreneurs like you is a webinar. And essentially this introduces people to no-code tools and to Bubble and to app entrepreneurship and shows how to get started. It goes over some of the big picture strategies with app building, and it also gets really granular. We start building an actual app on Bubble, and it really just deep dives into this whole space. Now, for any type of resource like this, we of course want to see how effective it is, and that means we need to track, because in order to make smart decisions in your business, you have to have data. Yes, you have your gut that is going to pull you in certain directions, but if you don't have data to validate that and help you make decisions, then you're not going to get very far. So the webinar tracking app that we've personally built for our own setup, it does that. All right, let's jump over to the iPad. Now, I'm not going to open up the actual webinar tracking app. I will open up some of the other apps that we've built, but I'm not going to because it's filled with tons of personal and sensitive information that I don't want to publicize on YouTube, lots of different email addresses and things like that. So instead we're going to go through the functionality just by drawing it out. So essentially we have our webinar, okay? And so people come into the webinar from different places. You know, we'll talk about the webinar like I just did here on YouTube so that people can be exposed to it and start their no-code journey a lot more smartly and correctly. And if you want to check out the webinar, you can go to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. Now, when they go into the webinar, it starts a path, and this is where our webinar tracking app comes into play. So the webinar tracking app shows the number of people who have actually registered and joined in on this webinar. It's pretty easy to join in. All you do is put your email address into an opt-in box, and then you get access to the webinar. So we track that number and we see, how many thousands of people have come into that in our tracking app. But then it goes deeper because we actually want to create really custom experiences for the people who are going through it so they can get the absolute best and most relevant help possible. So there are 2 paths people can take after actually opting in and joining the webinar. Path number 1 is that they start watching the webinar, and path number 2 is that they don't start watching the webinar. Now, we need to see who falls into which one, and we don't want to leave this up to chance. Now, you've certainly done this before. I have too. But there are lots of free resources out there, and so sometimes something might catch your eye, but in the moment you can't actually sit down and consume that and make use of it. So you put in your email address, you get the resource, and then you wait until later. So our webinar tracking app shows how many people actually go in and start going through the webinar versus how many people don't go in. And it tracks who falls into which one so we can take different actions and create custom experiences for each person. So for the people who come in and don't start, we actually have our webinar tracking app connected to our email marketing service, ActiveCampaign, and those two tools communicate with each other. So when we see that someone has not started the webinar, well, we're going to send them into ActiveCampaign, and they're going to receive a couple of emails that say, hey, you signed up for this webinar, and here's the link again in case it wasn't convenient to watch it right when you signed up. Go ahead and grab that information, dig in from there. And from there, we are going to see who comes back and does start. Now, seeing this type of information is really helpful because it shows us what type of communication is actually helpful in prompting people to go back and start the webinar. We want people to watch this webinar because it has such valuable information that is going to help them start building their apps correctly. It's kind of like a preventative type of thing. We want to catch people early before they've started building their apps if we can, because then we can prevent a lot of later problems that we see happening with people who haven't started correctly, right? So we want to do everything we can to get people in at the right time and getting the right information so they can prevent all of these problems. And having this type of information and these statistics within our webinar tracking app helps us do that for people. Now let's look at then the people who do go ahead and start the webinar. So we see the percentage of people who have, let's go back to here, sign up for the webinar, then the percentage of people who have started the webinar, and then we're going to take it into two paths from there. We're going to see via our webinar tracking app the number or the percentage of people who finish the webinar and the number or percentage who end up stopping or leaving early. This type of information is super valuable in, again, helping people prevent those later problems, because let's go back to what we were just talking about. The reality is attention is very thin these days. And so to find time to sit down and go through a training workshop like this, sometimes it doesn't happen all at once, right? So we want to, again, try to make it as easy as possible for people to get this type of valuable information as we can. So if we can see who has finished the webinar versus who ended up leaving early, well, maybe if someone is going to leave the workshop early because they had another time commitment or whatever it is, well, we can see where they left and what information was next in the webinar that they hadn't gotten to yet. And we can send that to them another way. We can send that to them via email. So again, we go back to those two tools, our email marketing service and our webinar tracking app, talking to each other, right? So we can still get them the information in different ways and try to help them stay on the right path as much as we possibly can. Going back to the flow of the tracking app, if we see the percentage of people who finish, well, then we can also see what they do afterwards. So for example, for anyone who joins the workshop and goes through that workshop, they have the opportunity to schedule a strategy call with us where we essentially create a roadmap for their no-code apps, planning, the development, the testing, and the launch. So we can also see the number or percentage who have done that. And this is really helpful because we can also gauge the relevance of the information we're presenting to people based on these numbers. So if we're seeing that not as many people are taking action after watching this workshop, this webinar, as we want to, well, that's a cue to us that maybe we need to go back and update the information, or maybe we need to present it in a different way. It's feedback to us to evolve the product, so to speak, the product being this workshop. The value of this for both ourselves as a business and for the people who we're helping is really significant because there are lots of different tools that could give us parts and pieces of this. We have things like ClickFunnels or lead pages or Webinar Jam. There's lots of different tools that offer bits and pieces, but we've created this to give us the exact information we want and need. And this helps us really create the most relevant and impactful business possible, which is of course what we want to do, but it also helps other people get the right information to help them succeed with their apps, because we don't just want to spit out information. We want to make sure we're providing the easiest way possible for people to consume that and then use that information. And, if we can have, 1,000 people over the next few months go through this, and whether or not we end up working with them afterwards, if they can use that information and build their apps, and maybe each one of them can help 1,000 people with their apps, I mean, you can start to see the really big ripple effect. I know I'm getting outside of the actual tool and the technical pieces, but if you really look at how a custom tool like this can have an impact on both yourself as an app owner or a business owner, and for your customers, your visitors, your users, you can really see how wide that can span. All right, let's talk about app number 2, and this is our LMS, our learning management system. Right now I'm inside our dashboard, and you can see here the products that we have within this LMS, this learning management system. We have our VIP membership, which is like a monthly subscription to a knowledge vault, essentially. So hundreds of tutorials and lessons on how to build different features, customizations into your Bubble app. We have our API bundle, which is an API video course, so teaching you how to use APIs and connect to outside services. And we have our fast track course in here, which is the foundational course where everything starts from. So this is a course that takes you from start to finish on how to use Bubble to build the core of your app correctly. Now, down here at the bottom, you can see we have Built to Scale. Now, this is that higher level direct coaching, training, and mentorship program where we work directly hands-on with our entrepreneurs. Okay, so that's kind of an overview, and the profile I'm signed in on right now has all of these courses, so you can see them all in the dashboard. But if someone had Fast Track and API, but they did not have the VIP membership, then they wouldn't see the VIP membership, but they would see it down here as that add-on or upgrade, so you can get an idea of how this works. So this allows us to create a custom display for our products. We can add products, we can do whatever we want, but this is how the layout is. It's super simple, but it's also similar to any other LMS if you were to be offering multiple products or courses on that LMS. Now let's go into an actual dashboard. So right here, I'm in the Fast Track dashboard, and you can see we have different modules, and the LMS setup is, again, similar to what you would find in your typical out-of-the-box LMS software. So for example, if I were to click on, module 3, creating your pages, then we have all of our lessons here. We can open up a lesson to watch, and that opens up the viewer and the notes section and the timestamps, and you can go back to the main lesson list, continue to the next lesson, and so on. We have our side menu with the different bonuses and extras included, and all of that. So typical LMS setup, but this is something that we've built specifically for our products, and we've created the layout and everything that you see here. Tool number 3 is our member tracking app for our Built to Scale program, which we were just talking about. Okay, so again, our member tracking app, kind of like our webinar tracking app, has lots of sensitive information that I don't want to blast here on YouTube, although I trust you. So I'm going to come back to the iPad here, and let's go ahead and clear the page. Okay, so our member tracking app is something that is specifically created for our Built to Scale program. And this allows us to give the entrepreneurs who we work with the absolute best experience and the best chance of success with their apps as possible. So we're gonna look at this on a line where we're gonna put the starting point here and the finish here. So these show the start point of the Built to Scale program and then the finish point. So we'll put this as idea, right? People are at their idea stage when they're coming into Built to Scale, and then we'll put pilot over here because the goal is to create and bring on board your first pilot users onto that pilot version of your app. There are lots of different components to the program, lots of different ways that we work with people, different components of their apps that they're building along the way that we're coming in and then kind of dissecting and looking at, different stages of testing and alpha testing and all of that. Now, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of the program, but it's important you understand that so that you can understand then what this member tracking app does. So in perfect world, someone would come in and they would go along this line from start to finish, just like that, absolutely perfectly. But obviously we're all humans, and so it's not going to look exactly like that. Everyone has jobs and families and lives and, you know, all the things. So in reality, it's going to look a little bit more like this, right? There are going to be some highs and some lows all along the way. Let's pretend that didn't just straighten out for us. But we have sort of this waved line, right? Now, the important thing, the really critical thing, is to make sure that we don't see any of this, right? We don't want to see these big highs and lows because there's too much veering off track, right? So we've taken all of our experience and our knowledge and we've funneled it all into this process so that we can prevent any of these drastic highs and lows, right? But again, everybody is human, and so in some situations there could be one of those, you know, drastic sort of shifts that might be starting to happen. Now, the app that we've built allows us to proactively identify these things, and that's where the real value comes from, because again, we want to keep people on as straight of a line as possible, because that means you're going from start to finish in the quickest, fastest, most direct way, right? That's the way it's been designed. But if we can see you know, these leading indicators of when someone might be starting to have, you know, a really big and kind of like an unusual high, which might sound sort of weird, but that can sometimes signify a later problem. So we want to try to prevent any of these drastic swings. And if we can see these leading indicators, equally if someone's starting to maybe veer in the downward direction, which we also don't want, then we can start taking actions ahead of time. Now, this is something that's really hard to do just by observing. Right now, you always have your gut, like we talked about, and that's going to lead you to looking in certain directions. But if you don't have data to back that up, then you're going to be making decisions based on assumptions. Not very smart, not very helpful for either you or the user, the client, the customer, whoever it may be. So you always want data to back that up. So if we can see these points, right, that we know through experience are going to signify these changes, then we can take action. And that's what this app is all about. You know, after taking hundreds of people through the program, we can see if someone meets, you know, X criteria, and X criteria, then over these next stages, they're going to be more in like this type of area like we talked about, right? But if we see that maybe someone has, you know, completed X criteria and X, but they are kind of missing in this one area, or, you know, maybe something that we've seen in their app is not quite aligned with what we want to see, well, then we know, okay, because we've seen this, then we can go and do, you know, X, X, and X. Obviously, this is a little bit vague here, but I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty little procedural components, but just show you what the app actually tells us. So while we're actually, you know, hands-on and communicating directly with everybody and working very closely with them, we have data to back everything up and to show us really these kind of future predictors of what we need to be doing. And this is something that we can't get anywhere else, right? There isn't a software that is going to be out of the box and that lets us achieve exactly this. But this is something that it's a major component of our own internal operations, and it has such a positive impact on the people who we work with that truly for us something like this is really invaluable, right? Because it's not something that we could find, and it's something that we can build exactly how we need. And you might have been in this position too, where you don't have what you need out of the box. You can't find it. And so you have to build it custom. And that's when the really, really big impacts can start to happen. Okay, so I said at the beginning that tool number 4 is something that every single person can use and build on their own, regardless of what type of app you're building. And for us, that's actually our website. And we're gonna go through it and I'm gonna show you some different components of a website that's actually been built on Bubble so you can see what's possible for yourself. All right, so here we are on the Coaching No Code Apps website, and there are some different components that I think are gonna be interesting for you to see what you can create. And this is the hub of our business, right? So if anybody is going to enroll in a course or if they're going to apply for our mentorship program, then this is where it's going to happen. So we're on the landing page here, and this has all been designed in Bubble. And it's really simple, and that's very intentional. But the major components here are, 1, we obviously have our landing pages. So typical website type of stuff. And you can design that however you want on Bubble. But 2, we have the workshop that we've talked about, so the webinar training. The landing page for that is obviously in here, but we also have the webinar itself happening on our own website. So we're not using an external tool for that. That all happens in here. This obviously goes back to the webinar tracking app that we have. We have that in here. We also have our blog, which a lot of people ask about when it comes to no-code tools. Now, there are lots of different ways you can build and create a blog. And we're not going to go into that because that's a whole other conversation for another day. But you can see that, our blog is on here. And so we have lots of content, lots of valuable information for people who are either looking to build no-code apps or are already building their apps. So that's in here as well. Now, there are a couple components that you don't see on here, but that are actually built on our main site on Bubble. So one of these is our crash course. Now, this is something that anyone who is subscribed to our email list can go through. It's a completely free course, but it's a crash course on Bubble, essentially. So it teaches you how to get started with Bubble fundamentals and to understand the different fundamentals of using Bubble correctly so that you can build your app correctly and a more scalable app and all of that. So that's housed on our same Bubble site, but just more internally. And that's something that is completely built on Bubble. So it's not actually on the LMS that we've built. We don't need it to really be over there, but that's something that's been created on there. And we also have something, it's actually a project that's in the works right now, so it's not available yet, but it's an essentials course, which is kind of like taking that crash course up maybe 10 levels or so, because we really just want to make it even more valuable. So we have a slightly different LMS type interface that's housing this essentials course. And when that's available, then you can see and hopefully use and find value from that too. But that's something that's also built on Bubble in our main website. Now, we don't have to build all of this ourselves. I mean, you can look at a tool like Kajabi, for example, and this lets you build different products, different funnels, have landing pages, marketing emails, customers, contacts, websites. You can build courses and webinars. I mean, a lot of the things that we've already gone through. You can find tools that will have this type of stuff out of the box, but there are 2 things you're going to be thinking about with these tools naturally. One is going to be the price. And in some cases, these types of investments are worth it. So, we could buy the Pro plan and pay $319 a month and be able to offer a lot of the stuff that we do offer. And you could come into this and look at something similar, but the reality is we don't have to. Not only does that mean we're not spending these thousands of dollars a year on a platform like this, but we're also not compromising on something that we're also spending these thousands of dollars a year on, right? Because we can create exactly what we want and how we want it and really quickly, and you can too. And especially when you're in the earlier stages with your app or even with your business, your priority right now might be on creating some of these tools yourself. Now, I wouldn't start too extreme. We certainly didn't start with all these tools because the first thing you need to do is get the initial validation, get the users, get the customers, and all of that, and then build on top of that, build the systems on top of that that will help you scale to helping more users, more customers, and all of that kind of stuff. But you can see the impact that it can make on your app, your business, and your users, your customers as a whole. Now, going back to the webinar that we talked about, the next step from here is really to join that workshop. So if you head to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop, you can sign up for that webinar. You can see kind of behind the scenes of what we've talked about today, which also might be kind of interesting. But most importantly, you can understand what's possible with no-code tools and how to start using them, how to start using Bubble to actually build your app. And whether you are building internal tools like this right now or later, it doesn't matter because these same fundamentals are going to apply to you. So head on over to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop to join in on that. And hey, if you found this video helpful, we would really appreciate it if you give it a like down below. It helps us help even more people with their apps and businesses. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you in the next one.